Today's episode is about how business can transfer cyber risk. Look, small business today is getting pummeled by cyber attacks. We're joined in the studio by Jeff Severino and Nathan Borgard from Locked In Affinity. And they're going to walk us through a practical and clear 12-step program for getting your organization on the mend and helping your cybersecurity defenses. There's a lot that most business owners and leaders in organizations simply are unaware of when it comes to what actually happens in a data breach from the victim perspective. That and more is in this episode. This is the story of how business can transfer cyber risk. Come join us as we dive deeper behind the scenes of security and cybercrime today, interviewing top technology leaders from around the world and sharing true cybercrime stories to raise awareness. From the creators of Vigilance, the newest global technology newsletter, translating cyber news into business language we all understand. So please help us keep this going by subscribing for free to our YouTube channel and downloading our podcast episodes on Apple and Spotify so we can continue to bring you more of what matters. This is Cybercrime Junkies, and now the show. Well, welcome everybody to Cybercrime Junkies. I am your host, David Morrow, and in the studio today we have my co-host, my illustrious, always timely co-host from Kansas City, Logan Potberg. Whose back is sore from shoveling a lot of snow today. And we have a really cool episode today. So we've got Nathan and Jeff from Locked In Affinity. And I'm going to let them explain their roles and let them kind of walk everybody through what Locked In does. It's in the realm of cybersecurity insurance, which is very important for small to mid-sized businesses, especially as we talk more on the mid part of that SMB space. But their approach to it is very consultative. We have a great relationship with them, and there'll be links in the show notes to their organization there right in Kansas City. Locked In is a global phenomenon, but they are really leading the charge for the SMB space. So Nathan, Jeff, welcome.
Yeah, we appreciate you having us. And Nathan and I head up approximately a $30 million unit of small business cyber insurance, serving what I call Main Street America. And then I think it's a great place to start just to talk about our background. And we describe ourselves as the Forrest Gump of the cyber insurance market. And what I mean by that is almost 10 years ago, we were both operating in segments that had nothing to do with cyber. And our teams kept coming to us saying, hey, you need to check out this one product specific to small law firms, because we do a lot of malpractice for small law firms around the country. Mm-hmm. And we're not tech guys. We kind of threw it to the side. And they kept saying, well, this is affecting large law, but it's starting to bleed into small law. Let's take a look at it. We took a 12-page app, gave it to our head of IT at the time, and they couldn't even fill it out. And we said, well, this isn't going to work. The price point's too high. The application's too complicated for the average everyday small business. Lo and behold, the designer of that came back 6 months later, 3-question app, and that today is the largest standalone small law firm cyber program in the U.S. And from that, we've spun it off into an accounting program for small accountants, real estate and title, and the cyber market has just evolved over 8 or 10 years. And we think our approach of not being IT professionals and really speaking to Main Street America and keeping things simple has created a very interesting practice to serve a need for small businesses right now that are just they're facing this issue, and it's just really hard for a lot of businesses to understand. So Nathan, I don't know if you want to add anything to that rambling.
A lot of what we do, like Jeff said, is very consultative, and we act kind of as an internal wholesaler for Locked In. So we work with a lot of other brokers and roughly 1,000 agencies across the country who transact with us, as well as the Locked In series on the small business. And like Jeff said, there's a lot of consultation in there because there's no consistency within the cyber market today. So it really takes somebody that's well-versed in the applications and the coverages to really walk somebody through it. Because again, there's no consistency from what one carrier or one MGA is calling a certain coverage versus another. So it does take a pretty unique team to be able to go through and weed through all that and be able to explain how it connects with the actual coverage and the business needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like your approach. So share with us, let's step back a little bit. When business owners of a, 2, 3, anywhere from 50 to 500 employees, leaders in those organizations, business owners, and they want to reduce their risk. They want to offload that financial burden, right? And that's what insurance, that transfer of risk. What generally speaking, I know some of your products will offer different things, right? But generally speaking, what are the things that cybersecurity insurance covers? Because I just hear a lot of wrong things. People are like, well, that's never covered. Oh, that is covered. And I'm like, we need to talk to somebody that's doing this, because we need to spread the actual, not promulgate more myths, right? What can you guys share with us about that?
I think there's two parts to that question, or two answers, and I think the story I'll tell is I got brought on to customer proposals, roughly a $30 million revenue business. So it wasn't a small business by any means, medium-sized business.
Great.
And the owner had I'll describe him as a Southern California. He had long hair, and they introduced me as the head of cyber, which I thought was, a very interesting introduction. And he says to me,
they do that to me too. It's hilarious because I got my engineering degree from nowhere. So that's great.
And before I could even say anything, the owner says, hey, look, I just want you to know, I think cyber insurance is a load of horse crap. I mean, he literally starts off the call that way. And I said, well, it's a very interesting start to the meeting. And I said, look, I think the way you need to think of this, and any business owner needs to think of this, is the cyber insurance is just the risk transfer part. That's all it is. It is just the risk transfer. You're taking the risk from the business and you're transferring it over to an insurance policy. And that's where you need to start. And then I said, well, let me back up and talk about what you're actually transferring. And if you're willing to absorb these risks, there's no reason to buy it. And in fact, I think if we're looking at a small business, we studied our claims data for 10 years. We had an outside company called Tetra. They've since been bought and the name's changed. But we had them look at our data and say, for small businesses, is there any commonalities in our claims data? Is there anything we can come up with at low cost or no cost that businesses should be doing? And if you really look at it, we came up with 12 items. And we said insurance is somewhere maybe in that 5 to 15 items on the list of things small businesses should be thinking about and doing. But let's back up to this risk transfer. And I told this gentleman, I said, look, whether you have insurance or not, these are the things you need to think about. Number one, if something were to happen to your system, so you come into work, you're shut down, what are you going to do? The very first thing you probably need to think about is, do I have an IT company, an outside company, a contact, a resource that I could pick up the phone in my time of need, contact, and that they're not going to, take advantage of you in a tough situation? Do you have that mapped out? Do you know who you'd call should you have any issue that you could start do some work or mitigate whatever problem you're having? I said, now, if you truly have an extortion claim, and when we talk about what are the cyber insurance policies paying, I like to think about it in terms of the college football top 25. So today it's Michigan. They won the national title. Well, the number one claim area is extortion. Far and away, it's the Michigan of what the insurance policies are paying.
It's the Taylor Swift of cybercrime.
100%. So if you're buying the policy, it's for, number one, that extortion protection. Number two is the social engineering funds transfer. So that's your Alabama, that's your Georgia, that's number two. And then there's this huge gap that maybe drops you down into the 10 to 25 range, and that's someone gets into your system that's not related to extortion, and they're in your system, or they breach your system through email or system. So that's the claim side of it. But to jump back to the risk transfer, so we've got our IT professional that we're going to call. They're not going to take.
So number one, let me back up. So you've got about these 12 things, because really, whether a small business, let's say that $30 million California dude, right? If regardless of whether they engage in cybersecurity insurance purchase and transfer that risk or not, these 12 things are reality. Right? So if the system shuts down, they will have to have somebody that they will have to call, right? That's
correct.
Yes.
Correct.
So, and then number two is what?
Number two is, well, okay, if we truly have an issue, and they breached our system, and we've got customer data, employee data. Do we have an attorney we would call?
Yep.
Do we have an attorney we would call that's just going to navigate us through the things that an insurance policy would take care of? Things like, do I have to offer credit monitoring? Do I have to notify my employees, my former employees, my customers that I've had an issue? So it's just these things to think about. Then
How
number
do you
three,
communicate to them, right? Like, how do you explain the breach legally without disclosing too much, or right? Like, that's a
and what are your duties? What are your duties? Do you have healthcare information where you've got HIPAA that you've got to deal with? Do you have, in the case of some law firms we've had that have been attacked, they've had to notify former partners. Imagine the damage there. Having to notify a former partner who's competing for you for local business or your clients, and you've got to notify them that you've had a breach and some of their case files are now out potentially in the public.
Yeah, that's not going to be a suit at all.
No,
you're not going to get sued at all.
And so these are just the things we're working through, whether in the files, what was taken. You've got your return cash on hand as a business, your balance sheet. If I'm shut down and I have my daily expenses, I have my payroll, my lights, my insurance, my cost to run my business. Is my profit affected? These are just all things.
An amount for ransom.
Do I have
that cash? What about an amount for ransom? You might need to cough up. Yeah, you might need to cough up $200,000, $300,000, $500,000, $1 million in Bitcoin. Like, A, do you know how to do that?
And B, do you know how to do that, or will that attorney you're hiring help you convert that to Bitcoin? So that's exactly the way we approach it and say, think about these things as a business. We'll get to those 12 things you could be doing at low cost, no cost that are going to keep you out, or at least reduce the chance that you get into these situations. But if you've got these other things squared away, you've got the cash on hand, you've got that attorney, you've got that IT, you know how to convert the Bitcoin, then I'd strongly, depending on if you've got all that in place, I'd strongly recommend not looking at risk transferring and buying that insurance. It doesn't make sense. You've got it all squared away. If you don't, and your business isn't in a position where you can absorb that risk, then it's a situation where you look and say, what is my cost to risk transfer that to get? So I'm picking up the phone. It's a 1-800 number, and these things are in motion, because that's really what it is. And I think if businesses or insurance people are taking it somewhere else, then then I agree with the guy saying, I don't believe in this. But that's not what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So all of those elements add up to the 12. Am I understanding that correct? Because I like under each one, there's really like 5 or 6 subsets, right? So that makes
those 12 are slightly different. And so that outside company that we had take a look at the claims data, they came back after putting an analysis of it, and they said, look, these 12 items I would have every small business do. They're low cost, no cost things, and they're what is causing the root cause of these people getting into these systems. And so Nathan and I turned it into some marketing materials, again, with the idea that if you're not an IT professional, if you're just regular people like us, could I understand it? Now, we then went to 118 pages, about 10 to 15 pages for each of the items, and got a little more technical. But it was stuff that you could just hand to your local IT guy or the kid that set up your server if you're not a big business, and have them quickly implement. And a lot of the things are just settings, or just thinking through processes.
Absolutely. The configuration. Yeah, it's the configuration. So many businesses are going to the cloud, and then you hear all these breaches in the cloud, and they're like, oh, the cloud's not secure. Yeah, it is. You have to configure it right, though, right? Correct. I mean, that's the whole point.
We describe it as leaving your home, and you wouldn't leave your windows and doors wide open. And a lot of businesses are just leaving their windows and doors wide open, and they're not even getting individually attacked or targeted. They're getting pulled in when they're searching for groups of businesses that have these vulnerabilities. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we do the analogy of the home break-in, because cybercrime, it really is crime. It's just crime online. And we do the analogy that when small businesses get sold a box, right? Like, there's so many cybersecurity vendors that are like, literally, we have this box. If you install this box, you will be secure. And I'm like, that's not cybersecurity. Like, that's not the way it works, right? It's a holistic approach. It's about layers, right? Because that is like somebody coming and they're like, we have this outstanding, military grade front door, and you can never penetrate this front door. Go buy it. And that's great. But cyber criminals aren't dumb, right? And they have specific modus operandi, just like criminals. And if you know in your neighborhood, every Wednesday morning between 4 and 6 a.m., they're breaking into homes just like yours through the side laundry room window, what good is that steel door in the front going to be, right? Cyber criminals are going to look at that and go, that's a great door. I'm walking around the side, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we're not going to go in through the front door. We're going to go in through a side window. And so that's why understanding what's on the dark web, what the top tactics are, what they're doing today, because it changes all the time, will really help organizations defend. So I really like that. So you explain, look, maybe you don't need cybersecurity insurance, but you still have this risk regardless. And so you can transfer that risk where you have one bat phone, basically, where you can pick up when every minute counts, because when a ransomware attack happens, your icon, you can't use your computer, your icons turn white, right? Like, not everything is broken down. Like, you can't get on your phone, you can't check your email, nothing's working. You now have an 800 number where you guys will then engage legal, engage systems, and then there's also the technical audit aspect, right? That root cause audit, because they have to go in and find out exactly what happened from a technical perspective, don't they? Because if they don't, they're going to come back. They're going to come right back in.
Average cost of forensics, and again, keep in mind, this is with contracts and relationships that do high volumes of business. So if you're out on your own with your IT professional,
it's all more expensive. If you buy it a la carte yourself, it's going to be a lot more expensive than buying.
Exactly. Our average cost of forensics is $10,000 just to find out what exactly happened. And if ransom's involved, the average cost of forensics is in the six figures, 100,000 range. And so that's just the forensics part to diagnose what happened, what files were taken, what was out there, not the remediation steps. Nathan?
Well, Jeff's example of talking to somebody who says, I don't need cyber insurance. On the flip side of that, especially in the small business space, you talk to people and they say, I have cyber insurance. And you say, oh, you do? Okay, well, let's take a look at your policy. And they say, well, it's an endorsement. It's in their liability policy, or it's on their professional liability, something like that. You really start to talk to them about that, and you see they don't have coverage for anything that's happening today. No ransom, no social engineering, nothing like that. It's all third-party liability coverage. It's a notification cost. It's data breach. That's it. But these people are lulling themselves to sleep saying, oh, I checked the box. I paid $150 for my cyber policy endorsement on my underlying coverage, and it's not protecting them against anything that's occurring today in the marketplace.
So it's that education piece. That's a really good point, Nathan. So is that on top of like a D&O policy, like a directors and officers liability policy, or is that on top of a CGL policy, like a commercial general? Like, where are those endorsements usually tagged on?
It varies. Okay. There are some in the professional liability space that have, a cyber policy that can be attached to it. BOPs, a lot of times, or package policies have a cyber endorsement that can be added on. That's generally what we see in the marketplace.
But that's all just third party.
Correct.
Oh, wow.
And the other thing that we see that's just been eye-opening to Nathan and I is when you sit with these businesses that have lived through this. And I think that would be the biggest thing I would communicate.
That's what changed my whole life. When I started to meet business owners that went through it, and the emotional, like, there have been guys that have passed out. One guy had a heart attack. Like, they see their whole lives flash before their
I think when I first started this, I was a lot like that customer with the long hair that I referenced. I mean, I was sitting there going, is this real? Is this really affecting these businesses? And I think Nathan and I have had a front row seat over the years of sitting now with business owners that have lived through this. And we see so many businesses. There isn't a week that goes by that I don't have a small business owner telling me, like, I don't need that. I'm good. It isn't going to happen in Iowa. It isn't going to happen here. It isn't going to happen.
We see it all the time. Yeah, we see it all the time. Like, it's not, we're rural, we're small, they're not going to get us. So long as you don't go online, you're fine. Just don't ever go online.
And when you sit with these businesses that have had to live through this, we just had one the other day tell us if, it would have put us out of business to not have $1 million risk transfer. Absolutely. The amount of time and energy and just that we've had to take away from our business to address this and keep the train on the tracks It's unbelievable. And in the cases of ransom too, another resource that we have to bring in a lot of cases is professional negotiator. And people don't even think about that. I mean, we'll have to bring in a professional negotiator.
I've met them. We've interviewed them on this podcast. I will tell you, that's an art form, because one of the things we do these public service initiatives where we're training people on best practices and how to be prepared. One of the things that we do is we just show a phone to, like, when we're presenting in front of a board. We're like, if that phone rang right now, are you prepared to download Tails and Tor, get on a Tox channel on the dark web, and negotiate with a Russian cyber criminal? Because if you don't have insurance coverage and a plan in place, that's exactly what they're going to ask you to do, right? And that's the reality. And they're like, that's not us. That's not going to hit us. I'm like, you're exactly who they want to hit.
100%.
Yeah. And in the countries that they operate, in the areas that they operate, it's not illegal for them to come in and ruin your business and to extort you and blackmail you. It's not illegal. Like, their programs are designed, right, to not hit CIS countries, meaning the Russians speaking all the different dialects, the Eastern Bloc, the Iranian blocks, the North Korean blocks. Like, their programs will not work on organizations using those languages. They're designed for us. And I say us, but it's also Canada, Australia, UK, right? EU. But that's what they're designed for. And nobody's going to touch them so long as they don't affect anything where the Kremlin has ties or right? I mean, even though they're not run by the government there, but that's what's going on.
I mean, you're spot on, but I tell small businesses, you got to understand who you're up against. I think they're, in my mind, when I first started this, I thought it was this kid in Northern California.
Absolutely,
mom and dad's
it's
garage.
like a kid in the hood. Yeah, it's exactly right. It's exactly what we explain. We're like, you think it's a kid in a hoodie, drinking Red Bull all night, cracking code, really, really smart. No,
in his mom's basement.
Yeah, his mom's basement.
I thought that's what we were up against, but that's not. I mean, these are multi-level office buildings set up in foreign countries. They're very well capitalized. They're highly intelligent. It's a profitable business model, and they continue to find, innovative ways to extort victims. And I think people just don't conceptually understand that's what you're up against until you have to live through it. And then the other thing, I think it was just eye-opening for Nathan and I. We had dinner in New York City with a business partner of ours, and they do $1 billion of U.S. cyber premium. And this was the CEO of the insurance company. And he was an interesting gentleman. And Nathan and I, again, we're not really IT background people. We're pretty naive in some of the regards of that, how it all works. And we asked him the question. We said, where's this going? In 10 years from now, we've got this cyber practice at Locked Affinity. We're proud of it. We think we do, a really good job of serving our clients. Where's it going in 10 years? Is it going to be here? And he looked at us and he said, without a doubt, 100%. And I said, well, how do you know? And he said, and his answer was fascinating. And I share it whenever I can with small business owners. He said, do you remember the oil pipeline attack on the United States? He said it was done by a group out of Iran called the Dark Side. And he said the U.S. government sent over Bitcoin. And then Bitcoin was supposedly not able to be decoded. And if you really look back, the U.S. government figured out a way to decode that Bitcoin after it was paid and pull it back. And then it was in the news and it was gone just as fast. And he said that was a message to the world. He said the message to the world was, we've got all kind of technology and capability, but we keep our cards very close to our chest. And we do it because national, world security. We like to not let everybody know what we're capable of and not capable of. And he said the message also was our critical infrastructure and our utilities are off limits, but U.S. businesses are fair game. And he said, they could stop it. The U.S. government could stop attacks on U.S. businesses very, very quickly, but they're not going to, and they're not coming to help you. And he said, these businesses are on their own. And I think Nathan and I left there and said, okay, our value proposition or what we're trying to accomplish is important because we've got we've got to get to the small businesses and say, look, this is what your exposure is. You're on your own. The government isn't coming to save you. Do you even understand what your FM is?
That is so shocking. Like to hear that they have the capability, which they do. I mean, you've seen it too. They infiltrate some of these dark web markets. They take them down. A few weeks back, Black Hat and Dark Side that was
Dark
involved?
side.
Well, yeah, Dark Side was involved, and then they got kind of broken up, and then they turned into Dark Matter. But all of these groups, it's like 185 people, and they just rebrand periodically.
Mm-hmm.
It's some of the same. There's ties to oligarchs, all of that, and what's amazing is they take them down and then they get back up. They take them down, they get back up, but you see it when somebody is attacking the wrong places, even in the U.S. or in Western countries. They're gonna lock it down. They're gonna say that's off limits.
Yeah.
So it's so true. I mean, it's not unlike traditional crime either, right? I mean, like, even because there's a limited number of resources and effort that can be applied, and so you have to say, well, this is still the Wild West. That's a part of risk, and American businesses, that's what it's all about, right? I mean, you have the freedom to go and have be captains of industry, but there's risk. There's inherent risk, and I think what you guys are doing is just fantastic. Let's segue a second and talk about the application process, because I think that's so interesting. Because if that's not done right, correct, that can create other risks later on down the road, can't it?
Oh, absolutely. And Jeff made the comment early on about the long application, and our head of IT couldn't even complete it. And
Right.
you start talking about giving this to a husband and wife who own a business, right? They hired Best Buy to set up their computers for them. They have no idea what controls they have in place. And what we see often is they don't understand the questions, so they don't answer them. That's one. Two is they say, well, yeah, we've got this all set up. We hired a professional to do this for us. So they check yes on everything. Yes, we've got all of these controls. We're secure. But what happens is at time of claim, going back to the forensics comments earlier, when they're running forensics on that, figuring out where the claim came from, they don't have MFA on remote. If they don't have an EDR in place, then there's a possibility that the carrier is going to deny that claim.
Yeah.
So it's really just an understanding. And again, carriers, MGAs, markets, whatever you want to call them, they all have different words, different coverage definitions. So some things,
and almost every word in those policies has been litigated, right? Like
absolutely
right. So they all are terms of art. They mean
absolutely
different things.
right.
You have to understand what that is.
Yeah, and some of the carriers, they'll throw a coverage into an insuring agreement over here. Another carrier will throw it in separately over here. So if you're looking at these different policies and you're not well versed in it and you don't know how to read the policy itself to see where that coverage lies, you could have a gap. And that's important for brokers to understand. There's a lot of brokers out there that we work with that tell us they're scared of cyber. They don't understand it. It's a new market. And because of the difference between all the different carriers and application questions and coverages, they don't even want to engage with cyber because it's too confusing right now.
Right.
The
What do
advice
you
I
guys
would give,
recommend? No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, that's exactly where I was going. The advice I would give to a business owner or a controller, and what Nathan and I see is just they're so used to there'll be one person, they'll be centered up on their insurance portfolio. So they'll be used to doing all the insurance transactions, and this is just a little bit different. And so I think the advice I would give them is just separate the cyber application from the normal insurance process. They're used to just filling out all the applications, and then they get to the cyber and they're either doing it themselves and going, oh yeah, I've got all this, or they're taking it to their IT or their person that set up their server. And we're seeing that a lot of IT professionals are working very hard just to keep businesses moving. And there's sometimes a real apprehension when you bring them an insurance application and you don't properly explain that, hey, look, I need you to be honest. I don't need you just to, out of fear, tell me I have all these things, because you're going to think that, the controller or the business owner doesn't think they're doing their job. We see a lot of that. And so then at the time of claim, they go, well, I gave this to my head of IT and he said we had all these things, but you never did. And so I think it's just this awareness of slow down. There's a lot of resources. There's a lot of things out there to help you should you not have these controls that are on these applications, but just get it to the right person, slow down, be honest, and then work through to get the controls in place. And I think there's just a lot of checking the box and then saying, well, it won't happen to me, or passing the buck until it does happen. And then there's a problem.
Yeah. And wasn't it about a year and a half ago or so, we saw that ICS and Travelers case in central Illinois, where a manufacturer had said they had MFA and they had it on one firewall, but they got ransomware on a server. Well, that server didn't have MFA. And so they had said we have MFA, but they didn't clarify. And so generally what I've read is they should, when they're applying for the insurance, just put an addendum. Just say, we have MFA. Here's what we have it on, right? Just be right to like tell the whole truth and just be transparent, because then travelers could have, adjusted their risk, maybe adjusted the premium or adjusted the risk, either not written them or wrote them for a smaller amount or something like that, right? Like it's still not going to blow up the deal necessarily.
You're exactly right.
Okay. So do you have like a standard recommendation that business owners should do? Like, who should they run their application by? It's probably different, I imagine, for every organization. But is it general? Do they run it by their lawyer, their IT provider? Is there a certain standard that you're seeing, or a trend, or no?
It's all over the place.
Yeah,
Especially in small business. I mean, it really is all over the place. And, we're getting on more and more calls with the business owners to walk through the application, really explain what these things are. If they're lucky enough to have an IT professional that works with them, a lot of times we're on the phone with the IT professional, walking through what these things are and how it relates to the insurance coverage itself. So really, as with everything cyber, there's no consistency on who's filling it out.
Right. Who are some of the bigger players? I know that a lot of insurers have gotten out of the market. Is like who are some of the bigger insurers in cybersecurity? Is Travelers a big one? Is Chubb
Travelers,
a big one? Like
Travelers
who are
is
some of the big ones?
the big ones. Travelers and Chubb. Those are some that we see a lot in the marketplace. We interact with them quite a bit as well. They're those holistic carriers who have cyber as an offering. There's other cyber only carriers, coalitions out there in the world. They've got a lot of premium as well. At Bay is another one that we see quite a bit. Beasley's kind of in and out of the market. Just kind of depends on the risk. CFC has a big presence out there. I mean, there's a laundry list of carriers and names that you would recognize, and there's a lot out there that you maybe wouldn't. There's smaller carriers coming into the space.
Right.
We've seen some new entrants. I mean, QBE, which is a big financially backed company, just entered the market, so that's good. Gives consumers more options and helps with pricing. And then London and Lloyd's of London have played a huge role in the cyber market in the United States, dating back to the inception of cyber insurance, 25 years ago. And they continue to have a huge presence and play a big role in the U.S. cyber market. So. It ebbs and flows. And the other thing I would say about the U.S. cyber market for people to understand is just the property market on fire and auto market on accidents. There's tons of actuarial data. People can predict the losses. They know how to remediate it. This is a completely different animal. There's no data. And I describe it as the sharpest turns we've ever seen in the insurance industry. So the market just pivots so quickly from a hard market, soft market, people running in, people running out, prices up, prices down. And I think that's going to continue, at least for the foreseeable future, until people can get a little better handle on what they're up against.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is some, as we're wrapping up, and you guys, and we'll have links to Locked In, and you guys have a phenomenal blog, by the way, on your site, which gives some great insight. What parting thoughts or what kind of advice would you give to business owners that know? I mean, they generally have cybersecurity concerns. They know they either need or want cybersecurity insurance. They don't know if they can afford it. They don't know what it should do. What would you say to them?
Nathan, you want to go first?
Sure. I would say engage with your agent or your broker. have that conversation, have them explain it to you. And if your agent or broker can't, for some reason, if they're just not well versed in cyber, all these carriers have different resources out there. You don't necessarily have to be a policyholder with some of these folks. You can give them a call on their 800 number. They can walk you through an application. You can engage with people who are familiar with both the information technology, the information security, and the insurance piece of it to help walk you through that. There's a lot of these markets out here today that are really focusing on the small business. They're the ones that need the most help. And like we talked about earlier, it's 85% of the market in the United States. So They really need to invest some resources there. So ask questions. It's scary as a small business owner. But if you don't ask the questions, you're not going to know the answers. So just engage with your broker, ask the questions.
Absolutely. And I would probably say, over the years, we've met a lot of people, whether it's through IT, whether it's through IS, information security, whether it's the insurance side. And my advice would just be align yourself with people that have the right intentions and their heart in the right place, because there's just a lot of fraud going on out there. There's a lot of people getting taken advantage of, but at the same time, there is a group of people, and we've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of them, that their heart's in the right place and they're trying to help small business. They're trying to educate them. They're trying to lay out options and say, look, I'm not just trying to run a bill up or stick you with something you don't need, but here, let me explain this and let me help educate and let me help give you the tools and resources you need. There's a lot of that out there if you get to the right places.
That's excellent. That's fantastic. So Locked in Affinity, based in Kansas City, but you guys have a national presence. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Any other parting words? Any other thoughts that you'd like to share? We really appreciate your insight on this. What's coming up next for you both? Like, what's on the horizon? Are you guys doing any presentations coming up? Are you speaking at any business events? What's on the horizon?
We do a lot of CLE presentations, continuing education for law firms, because we have pretty big law practice and they're a top 5 industry that gets hit. We also work with a lot of the healthcare risks because they have the HIPAA and HIPAA compliance concerns. So we do a lot of speaking around the country just to help educate lawyers and then give them their education credits. But I think where we're at as a practice, and it ebbs and flows with the years. We continue to build out and have more options than we did even a year or two ago, which is just good for the consumers and good for the market, and make sure we've got options in a quickly pivoting industry. Nathan?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we're constantly scouring for markets. We get solicited a lot from different companies. Like Jeff said, new entrants or maybe somebody that is established but we don't work with. We do a pretty thorough job of looking through their policy form and making sure that it kind of meets our standards. Lockton has pretty high standards from a policy form standpoint. We won't write with just anybody. So we do a good job of vetting those coverages and those policies before we actually start transacting with them. So, we're going to continue to grow that practice as the markets continue to shift. We need lots of options because every entity is different. Every business owner is different, and we need to have options to satisfy all of them.
Fantastic. Well, hey, thank you both, Jeff and Nathan. Thank you guys both. Excellent insight. I know our listeners will find a lot of value here. So
good. Well, thank you.
Well, that wraps this up. Thanks for joining, everybody. Hope you got value out of digging deeper behind the scenes of security and cybercrime today. Please don't forget to help keep this going by subscribing free to our YouTube channel at Cybercrime Junkies Podcast, and download and enjoy all of our past episodes on Apple and Spotify podcasts so we can continue to bring you more of what matters. This is Cybercrime Junkies, and we thank you for joining us.